So where does that, when I think about that sort of position that MapGive is in to support OSM, I take back to global youth issues at the State Department, what we're talking about today in terms of youth engagement. The State Department really has three kind of generic lines of effort in terms of global youth engagement and in the Global Youth Issues Office. The first is engaging global youth leaders and identifying shared challenges. That's particularly through consultation with our embassies and working with embassies and consulates to identify youth challenges and ways to promote youth throughout the world. The second, empowering global youth leaders through networks and opportunities. This is manifested particularly through our exchange programs, through the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. There's over a dozen exchange programs that bring people to the US or send Americans overseas. And the primary one that Chad mentioned or the primary one that we've been focusing on partnering with of late is the Young African Leaders Initiative. And the third is elevating youth voices and causes, and that also sort of takes the shape of our diplomatic work to support youth causes and engage youth and things like this. Now, Chad talked about USAID's work, and so that, in a sense, complements each other very nicely. And that's the same approach we're taking with MapGive as an initiative of the department and youth matters as well. This quote resonates a lot with me when I think about how we can bring, or how we can use and promote OpenStreetMap and GIS technologies writ large with engaging youth. This is a quote from Andy Ravens, who's the State Department's special advisor on youth issues. And so when I think of what we're doing, this encapsulates that. Technology and OpenStreetMap has the ability to transcend borders and unify people around a specific cause. And so we've, over the years, at MapGive and frankly at USAID with what was Mapping for Resilience before Youth Mappers, trying to find a way to systematically engage new mappers. I think that's the major premise of MapGive is how can we grow the crowd? How can we increase participation in the community? And if we're focusing on youth, what can we look at? Well, with YALI, what you have is a vast and deep network of young, eager African leaders who have both historically participated in our exchange programs or who are currently in exchange programs right now. That takes the form of a couple of different institutions or sort of mechanisms and how these operate. The first is the Mandela Washington Fellowship. That's the 1,000 people every year selected from 49 countries, or all the sub-Saharan African countries, and come to the US for exchanges and are hosted at various universities under certain curriculum. The other way, in these countries themselves, are the regional leadership centers. These are actually USAID managed, or public-private partnership, and there's 4 of them with some satellite campuses throughout the region, and they are physical spaces, usually universities or things like this, that host regular cohorts of YALI participants to do leadership training for weeks at a time. And so we convened a couple of different meetings in April and May to try to understand how can we engage youth in data programs. Well, we said, I was at the table and Chad was at the table, and we said, well, we can do mapathons. Let's try to partner with these physical institutions that are bringing people regularly to engage in leadership and leadership education, leadership training, and then also have an alumni network, let's say. So in a matter of weeks, we had calls and contacted these people and said, there's an existing vibrant open mapping community at the local level. And I mean, a number of people, I'm seeing familiar faces from State of the Map Africa, in Kampala in July, and that was really the nexus of so much happening with OpenStreetMap in Africa at the local grassroots level. And a number of people who were working on local OSN projects who were part of the YALI network. So there's so much overlap here. So we just, in a matter of weeks, we hosted, I think, 7 different mapathons, or we didn't host, I should say host, but we kind of spurred 7 different mapathons that took place, three at the YALI Regional Leadership Centers, and then 3 based 3 at US universities that were hosting Mandela Fellowships, or Mandela Fellows, and then 1 at the D-Lab in Tanzania that was focused on the same use case, which all these were around health and PEPFAR related projects. So these are just some images of those mapathons that we had. That's at the Ghana, West Africa RLC. They simply sent out an invite to their alumni and at each one, and then we had 300 in total participants in just the Africa locations. The South Africa RLC, in fact, had the mapathon for the 100 fellows that they had in the center at that time for their training. So there's a couple good shots here, and really, I think what we wanted to focus on, this is a very nice photo of Chad and myself Skyping into the one at William and Mary for the Mandela Fellows. I mean, these first ones, my real focus is outcome rather than output. I don't think we, went off the charts in number of map edits because the majority of people that came to these events were brand new, had never done OSM before, but in my mind, these are young leaders who are very eager and working in a number of different sectors, and it's about a two-way connection here. Because I should note that the mapathons at the regional leadership centers in Africa were all facilitated by youth mappers chapters in those countries. Very important piece there. So we're really trying to bridge gaps here and expose YALI to a new technology, a whole new sector, but also the youth mappers to what YALI fellows are doing in their countries. So just some upcoming events. We're actively working with the RLCs now to try and somewhat institutionalize this. It's still a work in progress, but how can we embed open mapping into the curriculum of those leadership trainings, and then also host events ad hoc now that they know mapathons are not the most difficult thing to organize, but you need the technical experts in place. We've got the youth mappers chapters on board, things like that. The upcoming events, OSM Geo Week, little plug for that. We'll have a Birds of a Feather after this to talk about OSM Geo Week. We coordinated along with Missing Maps. It's coincides with National Geography Awareness Week in November. Last year, over 100 mapathons took place in a week around the world. So we're trying to cultivate a network here. And just to wrap up, I think Chad will make a couple of remarks about how the data is being used and the use cases and things like that.
Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, you summed it up well when you said outcomes, not output, right? So a big thing that I do in my role at USAID is try and find a use for the data, right? We have this vibrant community of mappers, all of you, who contribute daily, weekly, monthly to the map. We've got this great youth mappers community. We're coming up with these use cases, but I try and promote the use of open geographic data within the agency, within USAID, who is very practical and does a lot of on-the-ground work. So a couple projects I'd like to highlight here are, one, the work that we've done supporting the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, also known as PEPFAR. PEPFAR is a U.S. government-led initiative to help reduce HIV/AIDS related mortality throughout the world, primarily focused in Africa. So they do lots of things, medication, research, clinics, set up clinics, stock clinics, train doctors. It's a very large initiative. And what's happened over the last, I'd say, decade or so since this program's been around is, you've always seen these statistics, which countries have the highest prevalence of HIV/AIDS, right? Well, that's great when you're looking at the continent of Africa. Then you drill into a specific country. Well, where is the HIV/AIDS within this country, right? Which districts, which provinces, and when you drive in a step further, right, which cities, which towns, which villages, where is the disease spreading, where is it coming from, where are the most prevalent rates? So the deeper in you drive into these countries and you start looking at this in more resolution, you need more detail of a map in order to kind of figure out, is it certain roads, towns along certain roads, is it coming, there are higher rates around the Lake Victoria, for example, which there are, in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. So what we're doing now is we've set up a series of tasks to create really detailed maps of specific areas that have very high prevalence of HIV/AIDS, and this data is being used to help look at the health catchment areas, right? Are the clinics, do they have the amount of supplies they need to meet the populations that are in need in those areas? Are there any underserved populations? Do we need to set up new clinics? How is the disease being transmitted? Is it along specific routes and roads, etc.? Are there certain places where we should be promoting awareness campaigns over others, right? And it helps with the M&E and some of the other projects that are taking place under the PEPFAR program. One I would like to point out is the DREAMS initiative, which is really one of the leading programs that's taking this deep dive into the PEPFAR programming. And another, which we've all heard of at this point, the work around malaria prevention. At USA, there's a team called the President's Malaria Initiative, PMI, and they lead all malaria campaigns at USA. So we've done a series of projects over the last couple of years, starting in Mozambique, moving on to Kenya, then most recently teaming up with HOT in Mali and Rwanda. And what we're doing is we're creating these maps, detailed maps of the areas where there's high cases of malaria, where they're going to do the indoor residual spraying campaigns, informing the planners of how many structures are in these areas. Right now we're also working with the operational teams in order to get them to either put OpenStreetMap on an app on their phone and use that to navigate, plan out the routes for the enumeration teams to take, and use the data in a more operational sense, as well as use those same maps and information for monitoring and evaluation after the campaign has taken place. We're also partnering with Patricia and some youth mappers who are doing research into this. So they're trying to determine how effective are these maps, how are they changing the outcomes of some of these malaria campaigns in certain countries. And every country is unique, and even within a certain country, different districts are unique there as well. So there's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of details to look at, but we are making some progress, and I hope to report by the HOT Summit next year that we have made leaps and strides. We figured out exactly how it should work, and we're starting to replicate that again and again. So that's my goal. And with that, yeah, just our continued engagement strategy with bringing on more youth mappers chapters, trying to link them up with other government initiatives like YALI, finding other programs and internships and things that are available out there to support the students that we're working with and to just overall improve the quality of the map. Andrew?
That's it.
That's it? Yep, thank you.